All right. So this is going to be a fun one. So last week I put out an email to everyone on my mailing list saying, would you like to know about hypnosis from a science perspective, or do you want to know from a woo-woo perspective? And unanimously, almost, there's a couple of people that said they want to know about the woo-woo stuff, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But almost everyone said they want to know about the science of it. And that was a little tricky for me because I'm no scientist, right? I did great in school with economics. I did great with accounting, terrible at law. But yeah, so here we are. So, how do I know and explain about the science of hypnosis? And so, what I did is I reached out to my hypnotist peers that are doctors. So, we got psychologists and we have actual, indeed, doctors that know the science and do the research. And you can look on this channel here under podcast and see the different doctors I'll be interviewing. And also, I'll include in this video a link to an article I just wrote collecting some of the best research that talks about hypnosis. And today, in this segment here, I just want to share with you some of the interesting things that I found out that I didn't even know about hypnosis. But first, let me just share the story of how we got here. Why hypnosis? So it started with my death in 2011. And I talked about on the very first podcast episode. So I had a cardiac arrest. So with the heart, there are two things going on. You have the plumbing issues, which is a heart attack where the arteries get clogged, and you have the electrical issues, which is a cardiac arrest. Now, with a heart attack, you can have a plumbing issue that leads to an electrical issue. Well, what I had was just an electrical issue. I was out to eat with my family and instantly just keeled over, lights out, fell on top of my 4-year-old son at the time. No warning, no pain in the chest, no dizziness, just instant gone. And the doctors didn't know what was going on at the time. At the time, I was a lot lighter than I am now. I was running races. I was getting adequate sleep. I was eating a well-rounded diet. And I've learned a lot since then too. And they did the CAT scans and they did the catheterization and they did all these things to figure it out. And they didn't know why. Even a PET scan where they inject this nuclear dye in you and you go under this imaging to look at the electrical pathways of the heart. And they still shrugged their shoulders. They said it's idiopathic. So that frightened me, right? But the point is here is that when I got shocked back, well, first, let me back up a little bit. When I died, this is the interesting thing. When I died, I was existent. I was somewhere special. It was a place of perfect peace. There were no bills to pay, no responsibilities. And yet, here's the other interesting thing is that I was nowhere yet everywhere all at once. It's kind of like that movie, right? I was connected to people all around the world, both living and maybe not living. For instance, my dad had started a prayer chain. He was a pastor at the time, and they had churches around the world. And when I was away in that place, I felt people from India praying for me. And sure enough, people in India were praying for me here in Connecticut. Fascinating, right? So when I got shocked back to life, I had all kinds of thoughts. One thought was, how do I get back to that place of perfect peace without having to die again? Because the dying, I was scared. I don't want to beat around the bush with that. That was a scary experience for me. And the other question is, so the statistics for an out of hospital cardiac arrest is a 4% survival rate. I had a 4% chance of living. They had fought for hours on me, shocking me. I would go out again, shocking me. I would go out again, shocking me, go out again. I went through a crash cart and a half of different medications and the voltage. So I was scared and I survived. And so the question was, if I survive, then what is my purpose? So those two questions have been on my mind and my soul since 2011. How do I tap into that beautiful place? And what is my purpose? And so the journey for me has been a spiritual one. That's why going into the science of this was a challenge for me. And so my spiritual journey, the woo woo side, involved me becoming a shaman, doing those astral projections, the whole lighting of the sage, calling in the ancestors, all that stuff. I experimented both with different spiritual practices and with different religions. And I want to remind you that I was a pastor before the cardiac arrest. So I'm very familiar with the Bible. I'm very familiar with the teachings of Jesus and of the church. And I was curious to how it all relates because the way I see and have found religions and spiritual practices is that everyone is pointing to something. And yet we as a society get so fixated on who is doing the pointing. We see Jesus or Muhammad, or we look at these stories, and stories are powerful. Look at mythology. They're all pointing at something. And that's what I experienced in my death. And yet I hesitate to even call it death. So yeah, so I became a shaman, did Reiki, and I even sat with people in hospice. And as the person is leaving their body through this dying process, there's a certain communication that's going on, an energetic communication. And just sitting with people in hospice for 2 years, seeing a variety of different people in different situations in their home and nursing homes, a lot happened and transpired and spoke to me. And I even did stand-up comedy for a while. Almost there, but not quite. Because there is something special about laughter. And yet I felt pulled because I wanted to heal people and give them that experience that I had without the dying part. And you could say that comedy does heal, although it's, you know, sometimes you're in bars and the comedians have these roast battles, and every joke is kind of like a hidden attack, really. You're either attacking someone else or you're attacking yourself. And that didn't quite feel right to me. But I did love entertaining. And I was like, oh, what's this hypnosis stuff? Right? Because I was good with meditation and I was good with mindfulness. But what's hypnosis? And that's where we kind of springboard into the science right here. So this article I wrote that I'm linking in the comments here, not in the comments, but in the description of this video, breaks it down into 4 parts. 1, how hypnosis compares to the placebo effect. 2, how hypnosis works in the parts of the brain that are activated. And then 3, what is hypnosis good for? And how does it compare to regular talk therapy? Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the science. And again, forgive me because I'm not a scientist, but I did interview a lot of doctors, and those are coming out every Sunday. I'm dropping the podcast and the video here on YouTube of my different interviews. And I've linked here in this article and in the description here the different science studies, the PubMed studies, the large meta analysis studies. And so this isn't just speculation. This is what works and what works particularly well. Because hypnosis isn't a cure all, right? Like, yes, does the mind help heal the body? Absolutely. And have people had miraculous stories? Absolutely. Like, even one of the great hypnotists of our time, Milton Erickson, he had polio and was paralyzed. And through the power of his mind, he's able to get up again. And I also want to be cautious about making promises. Can I heal the blind? Can I make the walk? Can I make people that can't walk again? I can't promise that. But that leads us into hypnosis versus the placebo effect, right? So there's different parts of the brain, and I'm just looking down at some of these notes here. The dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, dACC. Too many C's, dACC. So fMRIs study the different parts of the brain. So when people are in hypnosis, different parts of the brain are activated. And so they're the parts that are our critical judgment, that are looking at everything. And then there's the part that just kind of like goes along with things. And so hypnosis has a way of lowering the critical judgment. A lot of hypnotists call this the critical faculty, the part that questions, the part that aware of things. So you think of it like there's a guy sitting in your head on a filing cabinet, and we get this new information that comes in, and he's only aware of certain bits of information. And it's usually about 7 bits of information, plus or minus 2. And you give him the information, and he turns around and he looks in your big brain, your mind, and he looks to file it somewhere. So whenever we have an event that happens to us, we code it in our bodies, and that's what that guy is doing. And so with this is relaxation. That's the start of hypnosis, is the relaxation of that part. And it's not just a part of the brain, but also you look at the different waves, because there's energetic waves. And then it's not the, hey, the hippie, I'm feeling the vibe type of thing. It's an actual wave. So it starts off, the excited aroused state is the gamma wave. And then it goes down into beta waves, alpha waves, and theta waves, which is that deep sleep-like state. So through hypnosis, and it's not just words, but it's also the nonverbal, right? Because our subconscious picks up on the nonverbal things. For instance, you probably weren't thinking about your feet until I just mentioned your feet. Maybe you have shoes on, maybe you have socks, maybe they're touching the ground, maybe they're up, propped. But your subconscious is aware of that at all times. Your subconscious knows about how to regulate your heartbeat, how to regulate your hormones. It's controlling millions of bits of information. And so by first, that dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, chill out, man. That's what it is. And so, yeah, I did in the article, I have a PubMed Central article that you can check out. The next part is there's an increased connectivity between the executive control and the salience network. So that prefrontal cortex is what we're talking about. So we can measure the brain activity through these fMRI scans. And we can see that through hypnosis, that brain activity slows down. So that prefrontal cortex is busy and just says, oh, I got all this work to do. So, for instance, here's a cool little exercise. So, if you're ever feeling anxious or angry, or maybe you're trying to sleep at night, this is a great exercise because that part of your brain is lit up. The gamma waves, a little guy, he's like, I got to think about the signal. I got to think about this. So, if you want to calm down, try this. Try focusing on 3 things at one time. For instance, notice your breath moving up and down, right? Noticing your breath. All right. Pay attention to the breath and notice the chair you're sitting on. You're feeling the chair and noticing your breath. And notice the temperature of the room. So you're focusing on all 3 things at once, keeping that brain tired and busy. And then the hypnosis comes in, these suggestions. There's 2 ways to do it. You could do direct suggestion. You're beginning to fall asleep now. Or maybe while you're noticing the chair and the breath, you may begin to feel a little bit tired now. And notice the way I said those words too. So it's the way you say it, it's the cadence, it's the inflection, the lowering your voice, all these different things. So that's more the how, but we're talking about the science of it, right? So there's the default mode network in your brain, the DMN. And that's that daydreaming, worrying, self-referencing, right? Again, this in the articles below talks about slowing that down. All right, part 2. Let's talk about how it helps with therapy. So there's been a lot of studies that talk about cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, with hypnosis. So cognitive behavior therapy works from the top down. It challenges those areas of the brain, the thoughts, versus hypnosis works from the bottom up, where it is more the body, the subconscious. And that's where it's interesting because the science doesn't really know where the subconscious lives or the mind. We know the brain. And so we know these areas where the brain lights up in hypnosis, though we can't show where the hypnosis, this body experience. When I died, for instance, it doesn't really show where I went. And so when you do the therapy with the critical faculty, challenging your thoughts, and you talk it to the subconscious, it has incredible research. So, for instance, I put in here Taylor and Francis article about a 12-month follow-up showing that when you combine hypnosis with CBT, it outperforms by a large margin CBT alone. There's a large meta-analysis of anxiety. And when you combine hypnosis with anxiety and the CBT, 79% reduction in efficiency of it. So it speeds up how fast it dials down the anxiety, and it's a long-term effect. There's studies I put in there that are a 2-year follow-up. So not only is it quicker in reducing anxiety, but it also causes the anxiety to stay dialed down for a longer period of time. So you don't have to, again, I want to be cautious on making promises, I'm just saying this is what the science shows. You don't have to keep going to therapy if, again, I'm not telling you to stop therapy by any means. I'm not telling you to stop your medications. What I am saying is that it's possible through these numbers here, through large scientific studies, the gold standard of control trials and meta-analysis, that combined together makes it go quicker and last longer. Why is it for anxiety? Because hypnosis affects the same area of the brain where anxiety lives. When you look on the MRI of an anxious person, it lights up a certain area of the brain. When you look at an MRI, a person in hypnosis, it lights up that same area of the brain. And my podcast, my YouTube show with Dr. Frederick Mao talks about this too. Very interesting things. The other thing that hypnosis is really good for is pain. And I have another doctor coming up on the next episode talking about a study he put in the Journal of American Medicine, JAMA, that talks about hot flashes too. So these things hypnosis are really good at. All right. So this is an overview of what hypnosis is from a science perspective. And I'm going to dig deeper into this because I want to bridge the gap between the idea of the showmanship, because it was a curious starting point for me. I did hypnosis shows. I got people to believe that their fingers were stuck together and they couldn't pull them apart. Got people to forget their own name. And usually what I would do is I would say, if your mind could get your fingers stuck together, what more can your mind get unstuck now? And so there's a certain something that when you know the science, you could still believe in the miracle. For instance, look at the rainbow. We know how rainbows work, right? We know they're little water droplets falling down, creating this prism effect when the light hits it. We know the science, and yet it doesn't take away how beautiful they are, how miraculous it is. So wouldn't it be incredible to know the science and appreciate how miraculous it is to live a life free of anxiety, free of pain, without side effects? Now, but speaking of pain, there's a reason our brains tell us there's pain, right? We stub our toe and it sends a signal. The pain, it doesn't live in the toe. The pain lives in the brain. So we stub our toe, it sends a signal to the brain. The brain says, oh, this is painful. Either don't stub your toe again or treat the toe, take care of it. It sends a signal. And so when you look at pain, and there's some studies I put in here too about non-opioid use of hypnosis to treat pain. So maybe someone's recovering from a surgery, or people with cancer. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to just dial down the pain from where it lives in the brain? And it's possible, and it's easy, and it doesn't have any side effects. So I want to invite you here. I'll also put in the description here, if you want to experience some hypnosis, I have a free members area. You just click on the link below, type in your email, and you get into it. It's a bunch of free audios and videos, and it's yours for free. And me and my team are building it larger and larger, more and more, because we want you to experience the healing and the possibility yourself. We want to build trust with you too, so that when you see that it does work, then you could call us and work with us one on one. Again, just try it. If it doesn't work, fine, move on your way. If you don't feel like you want to work with us, that's fine too. Keep listening to those audios, keep enjoying them. And I'm asking you now, I wonder if you dial down anxiety, if you dial down depression, if you dial down the being overwhelmed and all that pressure, releasing the pressure, I wonder what is there inside. Maybe that still small voice, that voice that says, this is your purpose. This is your next move. This is the deal you're supposed to take, this opportunity you're supposed to move forward with. When the anxiety and the pressure are gone, what's next? So try it out. Click the audios. See how it makes you feel. Let me know if you want to go forward. And check out the article and all the links. If you have any questions, let me know. If you see anything that should be added, if you see some other research out there that you're interested in or that you know of, put it in the comments. I love to read about it. And if you have someone that you want me to interview for the next podcast, put that in the comments too. I'm really curious on how we can learn together and grow and make this a better place of less anxious, less depressed, less full of pain people living our best lives together. Until next time, take care.